Welcome listeners to the PSA podcast. My name is Art Brunzel, and today we will talk about the numerous threats that human activity has on the world pollinators. Here's Jake to start things off, to give a background and description of the societal issue.
Humans eat and drink food every single day, but most of us don't know that about 1 in every 3 bites of food we eat comes with the help from pollinators. So there are so many different species of organisms on the earth, and they all have their own purpose and function to society. But then there are certain types of organisms and species called pollinators, and they serve the purpose of pollination, which is when an organism transfers pollen to a plant to allow fertilization. Pollinators really provide us with much more than we realize, like fruits, vegetables, medicine, spices, and a lot more actually. And so there are 2 different types of pollinators, wild and managed. Humans put managed pollinators to work, like in the crop businesses, and then wild pollinators roam free and pollinate when they want, where they want, and so they're essentially out in the wild in various ecosystems. Managed bees are really important for agricultural businesses, and then wild bees pollinate in the wild, which is needed for the environment and different ecosystems. Pollinators really provide the earth with the essentials needed for life. However, there has been a decline in the pollinator population due to things like climate change, pesticides, and habitat loss, which is why we really need to address this issue.
Thanks, Jake. Now let's head on over to Lucas on how climate change can impact the pollinators.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Yeah, pollinators they're extremely important for life on Earth, more so than most people realize. And there are a lot of things that are causing the decline in pollinators, including bees. I just want to touch on climate change and how that affects pollinators. We are looking at the evidence, and it's pretty clear that global climate change is happening. The average sea temperatures are rising, as well as temperatures in the air, according to Amy Boyd from the Union of Concerned Scientists. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say climate change is directly hurting pollinators, but they're more of, stressing them out and in turn, affecting pollination. Climate change is causing pollinators to, relocate, so they have to adapt to new environments, just to kind of paraphrase Justin Warland from Time. That puts a lot of stress on these species, and they have trouble doing their job in pollinating plants when they're so stressed. The climate also changes, bringing colder weather during the winter further south, and that also creates a pretty difficult situation for pollinators to live in and actually pollinate. In order to help these pollinators, I think humans have to do more to help the environment. The amount of pollutants we are putting in the air that aid in the change of the climate, like carbon dioxide, is enormous. And I think, humans need to cut down on emissions and try and at least slow down the changing of the environment.
Thanks, Lucas. Let's see what Justice has to say about how pesticides can affect the world's pollinators.
Pesticides are another big problem. We use pesticides mainly to prevent insects from destroying our crops, but in reality it actually has a pretty bad effect on the environment and pollinators. A lot of pollinators, like bees, have this thing called scent memory, and they use it to communicate with other bees to complete pollination. And when they come into contact with pesticides, sometimes this messes up the communication between them, often leaving a lot of plants unpollinated. And of course, that's not the only reason that pesticides are bad. Of course, they're very toxic to the insect and end up killing a lot of pollinators. In fact, research done in 2005 showed that 5% of pollinators in the US were killed from pesticides, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it allegedly cost US government $13.3 million, and it was just a huge impact ecologically. There are a few things we can do to prevent the collapse of pollinator colonies. Some of these things include using less toxic chemicals, or just using less chemicals in general, or applying pesticides later at night when pollinators aren't out. and pollinating. But other than that, we don't really have any concrete solutions that are ready to be implemented right now, which is what we really need to focus on for the future.
Up last is Alex. He's going to discuss on how habitat loss and fragmentation can also influence the pollinators.
Habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation create problems for all species in the ecosystem, including pollinators. And of course, just like climate change and insecticides, humans are a major contributor to this cause. Habitat loss is occurring due to natural causes as well, though, and it also happens as a result of climate change. Pollinators have an extinction rate of 75% faster than they can reproduce, with habitat loss percentage increasing, which will eventually make that number go up. If habitat loss continues, pollinators' extinction rates will only increase and cause pollinators to be close to extinction. Habitat loss throws off the timing of when plants need to be pollinated and which plants need pollination, due to the fact that pollinators in ecosystem, it's like a job for them. They know where to go and what time they have to go, but when these plants are taken away, they don't know what to do. If the plants don't get pollinated, then they don't produce seeds, and then this causes competition within pollinators for food resources and other organisms within that ecosystem. Different types of pollinators pollinate and interact with specific types of plants, as we discussed in class. With habitat loss occurring, studies show only 24% of the original plant-pollinator interactions are still intact. The more pollinators' habitats are destroyed, the less interaction occurs between them and their food source. In order to prevent habitat loss, society must preserve natural resources and use them widely, as well as deciding how other organisms and ecosystems will be affected by urbanization. Habitat loss effects and solutions should be taught in educational courses to build awareness. With the rate at which the world's population increases, urbanization is inevitable. However, we need to try to preserve nature and the ecosystems present, as it could have a detrimental effect on humans as well, due to the fact that pollinators produce more than 1/3 of the food that we eat.
Thanks, Alex. Callahan will wrap up all the main points so we will never forget our message.
So overall, pollinators are endangered by climate change, pesticides, and habitat loss. The decline is inevitable if society doesn't do their part keeping them alive and well. Right now, every third bite of food that humans consume comes from the work of a pollinator. So not only do the pollinators play a huge role in our diets, but the economies that they are located in as well. Climate change causes pollinators to have to try to relocate even though they aren't fit to their new environment. Pesticides can cause pollinators' central nervous system damage and throws off their communication and timing of everything they do.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed and have become more aware of these impacts and threats to our world pollinators. This was Arbor Brunzell, signing off.